Chapter 15, Beowulf against the Firedrake. By nightfall, the Firedrake managed to cool its temper. It crawled out from its den and stood on top of the mountain. Its gold eyes flared like meteors in the sun. It was a long time since it had needed to leave the glittering hoard it gloated over. Deep in its tiny brain, a coal of evil began to glow. It wanted revenge. It looked down at the lights in the valley, the houses of the peaceful country folk. They seemed to form the shape of a great jeweled cup. The creature lashed its tail in fury. It spread its wings and swooped. Houses, churches, fields of grain, nothing was spared by the Firedrake in its ruinous flight. People woke up to find fire at their windows and ran from their doors, howling warning, only to encounter the same flames everywhere, leaping and lapping, laying the countryside bare. In the morning, when the Firedrake flapped back to its den, the valley looked like a basin of white ashes. Even the streams had caught fire and burned away. They brought the slave to Beowulf, and he told his story. When he had finished, and his master had shown the king the stolen cup, some of the lords of the court cried out that the slave should be offered to the Firedrake as a sacrifice. Beowulf hummed and then said, "No, let him eat honey." Most of those present looked curiously at the king and muttered among themselves, thinking him mad. "He's too old," said one. "His wits are warped." Only Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, had a good word for Beowulf. By saying the slave should eat honey, he explained, he means that we should find a little pity in our hearts for one who is driven by despair to do something he will always regret. "All the honey in the world can't sweeten the bitterness this wretch has brought down upon us," said one of the old soldiers. "It means the old days are back, war and strife and pestilence. That's what it means. You're young, Wiglaf. You don't know what you're talking about." Wiglaf flushed. "It's true I have no experience of battle," he said, "but I'm sure I'd prove as brave as you." "Well," sneered the soldier, "no one ever won a wound by boasting, young Wiglaf against the Firedrake? That should be a fight worth watching. When are you going to volunteer?" Wiglaf bit his lip. Beowulf silenced them with a wave of his hand. He might be an old man, but he still carried authority. "I will go against the Firedrake," he said. Nobody dared to argue. Beowulf began buckling on his armor. His huge hands shook. Wiglaf had to help him. The young man could not help remarking that Beowulf's body had shrunken with age. His coat of mail hung loose from his stooping shoulders. But his heart, thought Wiglaf, was as big and brave as it had always been. That would never shrink. Beowulf said nothing. He hummed to himself. He was thinking of a tale he had heard long ago in Hrothgar's court, at the time of the celebrations occasioned by his victory over Grendel. The tale of Sigmund and little Fitela, and how they had outwitted the fire dragon. Patiently, he began to form a plan in his mind. The old warriors murmured together. For all their complaining, they loved Beowulf, and they could not bear the thought of him going alone to what looked like certain death. A spokesman stepped forward. 12 of us," he said, "want to come with you." Beowulf nodded absent-mindedly. Good. "If swords are any use, then—" "Oh, they aren't," said Beowulf. Oh, the soldier was flabbergasted. "But you can carry the hives," said Beowulf. "The hives?" "That's right." Beowulf stood up. "Wiglaf," he said. "My lord, you come too." They climbed up the mountains. Beowulf went slowly, leaning on Wiglaf's shoulder. The other 12 followed behind, each man struggling with one of the enormous hives on his back. Wiglaf, on Beowulf's instructions, carried a newly cut stake about 6 feet long and a glove that would have fitted a giant. None of the others knew what these were for, and they all thought privately that Beowulf had gone quite mad in having them venture thus equipped against a monster that could breathe fire. Beowulf said nothing by the way of explanation. He chuckled as he told Wiglaf the story of Sigmund and Fitela. He said, "They used their wits, you see. If you can't beat evil by strength alone, then a little cunning is called for." Wiglaf told his king how black the burnout valley looked below. Beowulf nodded sadly. "No one can bring back the living who were lost," he said. "Yet some good can be plucked from the worst disaster. The Firedrake will pay for what it has done, not only with its life, but with the gold it keeps watch over. What good does gold do buried in earth? When we have killed the creature, we will use the treasure to build again each dwelling that is gone." An eagle drifted high overhead. Young Wiglaf looked from the eagle to his master and back again. Beowulf was bent and breathless. The eagle was the king of the air. Yet, thought Wiglaf, there was not so much difference between them.